She's a supervillain who also happens to be one of the worst therapists in the history of comics. We're talking about Karla Sofen, aka Meteorite, Miss Marvel, and Moonstone. Hi, I'm Nando, and in this series, pick a character from Marvel Comics. We talk about their backstory, their power set, their personality, and I give you some reading recommendations. This week, we're talking about one of my all-time favorites in terms of just characters who love starting trouble and who are always doing something interesting. We're talking about Moonstone. Karla Sofen is a character who's been around for a while. First appearance was in 1975. She's fought many heroes, made a lot of enemies, but she's mainly known for two things. She's one of the founding members of the Thunderbolts and comes back to that team a lot, and she played a huge role in the Dark Reign event. But let's talk about her backstory, which we get in reading recommendation number 1, Thunderbolts Volume 1, Issue 25. It was written by Kurt Busiek, with art by Mark Bagley, Bob Wakek, Al Vey, Joe Rosas, Richard Starklings, Comic Craft, and Saida Temofonte. And this book came out in 1999. By this time in history, we knew who this character was. She had been around for a long time. We are 25 issues into the Thunderbolts comic, which is where a lot of people learned who Karla is. But this issue went into her backstory, which explains a lot about the character that I think is important to learn now because it all informs where she ends up. So Karla's parents were poor. They were a maid and butler who worked for a rich family that Karla was kind of part of by being friends with the family's daughter, and her mom and dad just worked and worked and worked, and Karla always watched this, and she felt bad. And then her father died. Her mom could have stayed on and they could have lived with the family, but her mom didn't want to take any handouts, so she got more jobs, which helped to put Karla through college. And Karla said in this issue that seeing her mother's face at her graduation, her mother, who'd worked her whole life to keep Karla safe and to provide for her, Karla felt contempt. She never wanted to be in that position, never wanted to have to struggle, never wanted to have to scrape by, never wanted to have to put other people's needs above her own. She just wanted to be secure. So a lot of Karla's personality stems from the fact that she grew up without a stable home, a mother who was constantly working, and she never wanted to end up that way. So she goes into psychology because she also wants to learn how to manipulate people. And this is one of my favorite things about Karla and why I think she's so fun. This is before she had any superpowers. Although she does eventually start working with Dr. Faustus and learning about hypnotizing people and stuff, but at its core, what makes Karla so much fun is she is a humongous problem. Early Karla wants nothing but to cause trouble. What I mean is she'll join a team, like the Thunderbolts, for example, and just naturally start manipulating people. Partially because she wants power, partially because she's curious and a little antsy, and that's just what she does. So you throw Karla on any team or put her in any environment with any characters, and you're going to get something interesting. Because you never know what she's going to do. You never know what she wants. She doesn't even know what she wants. And you see this in issue 25 of the Thunderbolts, which is the end of a big arc where the Thunderbolts fight the Crimson Cowl, and Karla gets a chance late in the game to switch sides. And whenever you see this in a book, like if Songbird was doing this, we'd be like, well, Songbird isn't going to do that. She's like a good guy. But Karla, even though she is technically like on the good guy team at this point, you're still like, she might switch sides. Or she might try to usurp Crimson Cowl. Or she might do the right thing. You never know. And even Karla, when she eventually betrays Crimson Cowl, doesn't know why she did it. Because she doesn't fully understand herself. Which is what makes her so interesting. But so she becomes a psychiatrist that manipulates people for her own gain and for fun. And there's really two psychiatrists in the Marvel universe. There's Doc Samson, who's nice and good, and he'll show up every so often and do like a therapy session with some hero who's struggling. And then there's Karla, and she is the evil therapist who shows up and makes things worse. And they don't like each other. So while Karla is a psychiatrist and she is working with Dr. Faustus, learning how to manipulate people, she hears about a person named Moonstone. And he's a supervillain, and he has the powers of the Moonstone, which is really not worth explaining, but it's this Kree artifact that was on the moon that you can absorb into your body and gain superpowers. He's got it, and Karla recognizes this as a humongous opportunity. So what she does is partially use some hallucinogen that Faustus gave her, but also just her regular manipulating skills to trick the current Moonstone into thinking that being the Moonstone is bad. It's causing him all these problems, so that he gives it up, only for her to take it and become the new Moonstone and become just a straight up supervillain. It is so much fun. And a lot of this is explained in one of her first appearances in the Incredible Hulk comics. Like this is 229, but I'm not going to say this is that important because that's not the period of her life that we're really focusing on. And everything I just said is pretty much all that mattered. So for a while, Karla is a pretty consistent villain in the Marvel Comics universe, and she fills a very specific role. Ends up fighting Captain Marvel a lot, who at this point is Monica Rambeau, but also joins up with supervillains. You know, she's not above that. And like I said, she loves to be on a team because she loves to manipulate people. Falls in with Baron Zemo, who, after she was put in jail, rescues her, and this is when he's going to do Thunderbolts, version 1. And the idea for the Thunderbolts is all the heroes, not all of them, but many of the heroes, were trapped in a pocket dimension, so they were like stranded there, that there are no Avengers and X-Men, so the villains are running wild. So Zemo goes, we can all create superhero identities and just show up, and they need us because everything's so bad that we will become the new Avengers. And we can use that to get all the stuff that we would usually steal anyway. So we can use it to get state secrets, we'll get more access. Also, they'll just give us things, and they won't put us in jail, we'll get to live comfortably, it'll be the best. So Zemo recruited a bunch of other villains, including Moonstone, who became Meteorite, which I think is an improvement over her original Moonstone costume. I will say, it's got a lot of texture to it that will eventually go away when the Thunderbolts become good guys. I think I like that version more. She also has this big mask, but whatever. So Moonstone is kind of the second in command here because she's got a lot of power, she's pretty capable, and she's smart. Although Zemo knows she's going to manipulate everybody, so he doesn't fully trust her. And when the Thunderbolts have their big split, and Zemo and Techno are like, no, we want to be supervillains and take over the world, Moonstone is the last domino to fall onto the good guy team. And she sits there in the middle and goes, should I be a bad guy or should I be a good guy? Which one's better for me? And eventually decides, because maybe she does have some morality at this point that she doesn't want to admit exists, that she wants to be a good guy. So they fight Zemo, who has mind controlled all the heroes who are back now. They team up with Iron Man, they save the day. And the Thunderbolts turn themselves in, although they're transported away before they can be turned in. And they eventually end up forming a team with another character who wasn't originally a Thunderbolt named Jolt. And then Hawkeye is around for this, and they fight other supervillains. And Karla, as Moonstone, is kind of the leader of this team. One other thing that comes up is some of the members of the team are kind of young. Jolt obviously is young. I would say Songbird reads as younger, and Atlas reads as younger, kind of unexperienced. Whereas guys like Mach 1, Techno, and Meteorite or Moonstone are characters that have been around for a while. So they end up taking these leadership roles. And Moonstone has kind of become a mentor to Jolt, which is weird because that's not usually the kind of thing she would do. But it's hey, maybe she's trying to manipulate her, who knows? Time passes, Moonstone has more adventures, does bad guy stuff. But then the next big story point that I want to focus on is Dark Reign. So Norman Osborn becomes in control of the Thunderbolts, and he has to deal with Moonstone. And because he does not want to be in the field at this point, he has Moonstone lead this team. And Moonstone does not get along with Songbird because Songbird is just pure good guy, and Moonstone is still a problem. So Moonstone is not very good at leading this team. And she tries to manipulate Norman Osborn for fun because she wants to be in charge of the Thunderbolts. So she messes around with his medication, and this ends up getting her kind of demoted in the next version of this team, the Dark Avengers. So Norman Osborn, now with all of the cachet that comes from winning a war against the Skrulls, creates his own version of the Avengers, stocked with either characters filling archetypes like Ares is that team's Thor, or characters pretending to be other superheroes. So Moonstone just puts on a Miss Marvel costume, and she's like, I'm Miss Marvel. And her power set is close enough to Miss Marvel's that this isn't really that big of a deal, and Miss Marvel used to be on this Avengers but then quit, so she fits right in. And Karla, again, humongous problem. Starting fights with everyone, sleeping with a lot of members of the team, including, like I have said in a lot of these videos, one of my favorite moments where she sleeps with Marvel Boy, and then casually asks him if she thinks it's cool that they're all bad guys pretending to be good guys, and then he didn't know that that was the plan, and is like, what? And then leaves the team. But also, she does this with Bullseye. She just wants to manipulate everybody. But it's a weird team for her because she's not the most powerful person on this team, and she's also not in charge. At the same time, there's a series going on that's Miss Marvel, but it is Karla now. She is the main character. And there's this weird thing that's happening where there's multiple versions of the actual Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers, at the time, just around. And this arc ends with the different versions of Carol Danvers coming together and fighting Karla as Miss Marvel and turning her back into Moonstone. And also in this issue, Carol gets in Karla's head and learns some things about her. The big one is that Karla also killed her mom, and she did it because she felt bad about being a supervillain and didn't want her mom to see her do that. But she did want to be a supervillain, so she killed her mom. Something we did not know until this point. It was hidden behind a mental block in her mind up until now. Carol also realizes that because the Moonstone is made of energy, and Carol can absorb energy, she just take the Moonstone from Karla, and Karla doesn't have anything she can do about it because now she has no superpowers. And because of her bond with the Moonstone, if Karla stays away from the Moonstone for half a week, she'll just die, and Carol takes the Moonstone and leaves. But this feels like a big turning point, so I'm going to say this is reading recommendation number 2. This is Miss Marvel Volume 2, Issue 46, written by Brian Reed, with art by Sana Takeda and Dave Sharp. Carol's basically listen, you've got a lot of power. I'm not going to kill you, but there is a way forward for you. and I want you to become reformed. I want to see you become an actual good guy. And Carol hides the Moonstone at Karla's mother's headstone and her grave, forcing Karla to confront the fact that she killed her mother and realize that she felt guilty about that because she's not pure evil. But then this all came together in an arc where Luke Cage took over the Thunderbolts. Now, Karla had been arrested because the Dark Avengers were taken down. This is after the Siege event, which was basically Norman Osborn trying to fight all of the superheroes and Asgard and losing. And Karla ends up in the raft. There's some fun stuff here where she's just bored, so she tries to get into Ghost's head, but Ghost is such a mystery, like we didn't even know Ghost's name at this point. We're able to figure out Ghost's backstory in this moment, but then there's a big fight. I can't remember why, I think maybe the Sentry escaped from prison or something like that, but Moonstone and some of the original Thunderbolts, along with some other villains who were also at the raft, all tried to escape, but ended up getting sent through space to do basically Legends of Tomorrow stuff, where they went to different time periods, tried to blend in, tried to figure out what was going on, fixed their teleporter, which was also kind of Man-Thing, so that's tricky. And Karla led this team. I think this is a really interesting moment because this is right after a lot of that Ms. Marvel stuff. And Karla knows she cannot get back on her own. So she is forced to take this leadership position on the team, and it leads to one of my favorite books for her, which I will say is important issue number 3, even though it's not that important. But it is Thunderbolts, Volume 1, issue 164. It's by Jeff Parker with art by Kev Walker, Terry Pallett, Fabio Deora, Frank Martin Jr., and Joe Caramagna. And what you need to know leading up to this is they ended up in the time of the Invaders, which is like World War II, Captain America, Human Torch, Namor, like that team. And all these Thunderbolts need to work together with Captain America. And what Moonstone decides to do, and what this team will do in future books, is reinvent themselves so they fit in that time period, and also so they can gain the trust of the people there. So they create this old school team called the American Thunderbolts. They all get new outfits that fit the period, and she's the leader. I think this is a great place for her because, like I've been saying, this character loves to manipulate people, and she usually uses that for evil. Sometimes she'll, as a good guy, manipulate a supervillain, kind of like how Spider-Man makes jokes to get the supervillain's guards down. She's very good at that, picking at weak spots and using that to create chaos in supervillain teams that she's trying to fight. But at this moment, like, all of Karla's skills kind of come full circle because she has masqueraded as a hero before. She's been a hero before, and she loves to manipulate people, so she uses this heroic identity to trick Captain America into trusting them at a point where, like, they're working with Captain America. They don't want the Nazis to kill Captain America, but they really just want to get home. But because Karla has this experience, she is able to play this role in a way that is helpful for everybody. And I really like that. I also think the idea of reinventing these characters in new period outfits is always fun. Satana turns into like an evil devil girl, Boomerang turns into a flying ace. It's great. Now, Karla had plenty of adventures after that because they did end up getting home. They ended up on an alternate version of Earth. She started working with the second version of the Dark Avengers, which isn't as fun as the first, but is kind of interesting. The last thing she did that people will recognize was part of the Ravencroft comic, where originally she was sent to Ravencroft, which is like the Arkham of Marvel Comics, as a patient, but then became part of the staff. So she sort of filled the role that, like, Harley Quinn fills sometimes. Although usually at this point in her career, Harley Quinn is a good guy, whereas this is at the end of 40 plus years of Moonstone stuff. Moonstone and Karla and Ms. Marvel, no version of this character has ever appeared in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I think is a real shame, especially because, and I was thinking about this recently, we have our Thunderbolts movie coming up, but that's not quite the usual Thunderbolts. And I don't see a world where there's a Thunderbolts 2 where they just do the regular version of the Thunderbolts, where they are villains masquerading as heroes. And at the same time, because The Marvels was a financial failure, I don't see us getting a Captain Marvel 2 or whatever it would be called, where Moonstone is just a villain. And then you could say, well, maybe that would be a Moonstone movie, but it's like we can barely get the Blade movie off the ground, and after Secret Wars, it's going to be X-Men and Fantastic Four, so I don't think the Marvel Cinematic Universe will do any Moonstone stuff for a while, which honestly is kind of a shame, because I think this character is really fun. It's the kind of role that would be great to give an actor who gets to ham it up and be just a pure evil monster, and I think the version of the Thunderbolt she is on is a very compelling story that people would like. But like, it doesn't work, at least the way the Marvel Cinematic Universe exists right now. It's funny, maybe the next best place for her to show up would be in a Hulk thing, or maybe a Nova, because she is sometimes a space villain. At least her powers come from the Kree. But I don't know, I would be surprised if we see Moonstone in the next 5 years, even though we definitely should. As far as her personality is concerned, she loves to manipulate people, that's it. She'll do it for whatever reason, but really she's just in it for the love of the game. She's had a lot of physical relationships with characters, none of which seem particularly meaningful. Just seems like something either she enjoys doing, or something she does to further manipulate some of these guys. As far as friends and allies, she does get along with some members of the Thunderbolts, especially Fixer, who was an original Thunderbolt, and she went on the time travel adventure with. Like, those two seem to get each other, even though they were on opposite sides when the Thunderbolts split. You know, she hates Captain Marvel, although she kind of maybe respects her, and she ends up working a lot with guys like Zemo and Norman Osborn, but she doesn't seem to like them. Now, we're talking about Moonstone this week because she's just been introduced into the collectible card game Marvel Snap. In Marvel Snap, Moonstone is a 4-cost, 6-power with the ongoing effect, has the ongoing effects of your 1, 2, and 3 cost cards here. So for me, this sort of makes sense, because Moonstone is one of those characters, especially because of her energy-related powers. Like, she has flight, she has speed, but she has the power to absorb energy. That means she is very flexible. I would say the biggest thing here is Moonstone works well with other cards. But specifically, Moonstone works well with less powerful cards than her, because those are the people on the teams that she is a part of that she would manipulate. Assuming that, you know, the cost is what designates power, but instead of power. But you know what I mean. As a more senior member of the team, Moonstone can use people like Ant-Man, or Patriot, or Cerebro, which isn't a person, but you know what I mean, or Mystique, and amplify their powers. I do think she's going to be a card that is useful. I don't think she combos particularly well with many of the Thunderbolts. Like, she's not great with Zemo. He's like one of the only ones that's in the game at this point. Then when it comes to Dark Avengers, not particularly useful with Dakin. She'll be good with Victoria Hand, a character she does not get along with. She will be buffed by Spectrum, who is the Captain Marvel or Miss Marvel character that she will actively work with. She doesn't really synergize well with Carol or Kamala. And like all of the Captain Marvels, she is very vulnerable to Rogue. Last thing, obviously I always talk about the variants here. The base art, Ryan Kennard, Eduardo Mello, good, solid. This is like the base Moonstone costume when she's not on the Thunderbolts. It's a costume I like it way more than her Thunderbolts costume, which you do sort of see in the Marcello Vignali variant, colored by Moon Colony. Those are definitely the colors. This seems like a kind of scaled back version of that costume, although I'm sure there's some version of the costume like this. I guess the main thing with me is this is the kind of mask I think she should have. It's like a bigger version of the Domino mask that goes back a little bit, as opposed to this humongous headpiece she has that looks kind of like what Hawkgirl wears in the comics. And then the Spotlight version here is by Pandart Studios. This one's gorgeous, and I love Pandart. I think pretty much everything they're doing for the season is great. Oh, and this week's Spotlight Cache came with 2 very interesting variants. One is a Nocturne. That's fine. Not a whole lot of Nocturne variants in Snap, so I understand why people might want to snap that up. Then one is a Black Swan that I think looks interesting, but a closer examination, people pointed out, the face on Black Swan looks a lot like Vladimir Putin. I'm not sure what's happening there, but it is a strange appearance. So that's Moonstone. She's so much fun. Speaking of things that are my favorite, let's talk about this video's sponsor, Nebula. You know Nebula, it is a subscription streaming service that I and a bunch of YouTubers helped to create. It focuses on giving the creators more power to make the cool stuff that you guys already like, and giving you guys a better experience for watching it. That means all my videos go up ad-free. Some of them are early. The Nando V Movies videos are early. The Nando Cut videos are like a little early, but they're not as early because they're like a thing that happened yesterday usually. We curate different video lists based on what people are talking about. So if you're watching that new Dune show, for example, and you want to watch some videos about Dune, we've got a bunch of those. We make that really easy to find. You can just watch that. We also have Nebula Originals. So these are all kinds of things. We've got like a pro shoot of a play by Abigail Thorne. Patrick Willems has made a Christmas special. His full-length feature film about an evil coconut. He's got a new short film coming out with a cast full of actors like Zach Cherry, who fans of this channel, I mean, you know him from so many things. Perhaps he has been in Severance, he loves Severance, Fallout, but I mean, realistically, a good portion of you know him as the guy who tells Spider-Man to do a flip, or the guy who is taping the Shang-Chi fight. But either way, he is in this, and that is something you can only watch on Nebula. Tom Nichols just made a documentary about gerontocracy, about how boomers have changed the world and government, and is it good, or is it even really a thing? A subject that has only gotten more relevant since this documentary came out. We have so many other cool things I think you guys are going to love. You'll find out about them soon. And I always say, a year of Nebula is a steal at $5 a month or $60 a year. But if you use the code TheNandoCut at checkout, you can get a year of Nebula for $36. It's a great deal. Check it out. Go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut. Use the code thenandocut at checkout. I guarantee you'll find something cool you're going to like. That's all I got. Stay safe, and I will see you next time.